Bible, at the top of your notes, it says we're going to be in Ruth chapter 1. So if you would turn there, put your finger in there, and then flip over to Acts 17. So we're going to be in Ruth chapter 1. Put your finger there, and then flip over to Acts 17 for me real quick. I'm very excited. I actually get to start my very first series. Normally I preach and then it'll be like 3 or 4 weeks before I get to preach again. I'm actually teaching 2 weeks in a row, so I get to do a series. I'm very excited. Pastor Devin said I may even get to continue on through the summer, so we might actually make it through the whole book of Ruth. Well, right now what I want to do is I want to start in Acts chapter 17. We're going to look at verse 26. And this is Acts 17:26. This is actually my favorite verse in the whole Bible. Most people say John 3:16 is. Some people say Ephesians 2:8-9. Acts 17:26 is my favorite verse. And it goes something like this. And hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation. And just to explain what's happening here, Paul is in Athens, and he's talking to the men of Athens, and they're very smart. They're always looking for things and trying to understand how things work out. And so Paul's giving them this sermon. He's explaining to them about their gods and so on like that. And that particular verse right there, the reason I like it so much is, well, actually maybe I shouldn't tell you. You can try to figure out what it has to do with the book of Ruth as we work through it. So we're going to stop there. We're going to go back to Ruth chapter 1. So flip back there for me. If you kept your finger there, it'd be easy to do. But keep that verse in mind. So we're going to come back to it at the end to see if you can figure out the correlation between Paul's sermon and the book of Ruth. All right, we're going to look at just 5 verses tonight, verses 1 through 5. It says this. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took wives of the women of Moab. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. Verse 5. And Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them. And the woman was left of her 2 sons and her husband. Let's pray real quick. Father, I thank you for this evening. I thank you for the absolutely beautiful weather you've blessed us with the last couple of days. And Lord, I ask that it would continue. Lord, I thank you for the opportunity for us to look at this great story here in the Bible. It's just probably one of the greatest short stories ever written, Lord. And I thank you that. And most importantly, Lord, I thank you that there is so much that you teach us from this story. Most importantly, that you are sovereign, you are in control of everything, even when it looks like things are at their darkest. Father, be with me now as I am bringing this lesson, Lord. Give me the right words to say. Help me to move aside and so that the words that you put down in the Bible will come through. If it's not about me, but it's about the message that you put here. Lord, I ask that you would be with the folks that are listening, that their ears would be open and their hearts would be open to the message that you have. We ask all in your name. Amen. All right, if you look at your outline there, since this is Pat's week, I do have to kind of give her props. And Dan just walked in. I sent her this very plain, just bullet point outline, and you can see the wonderful work that she put together. So when you see her, thank her, because this is much nicer than anything I would come up with. But the first thing we want to look at here in this story, like I said in my prayer, this is probably one of the greatest short stories ever written. It'll take you, if you sit down and you read straight through all 4 chapters, it'll probably take you about 20 minutes. But it is just a fabulous story. It's one that everybody should get into and just dig into and just enjoy because it's so great. But what I want to do first is I want to look at the setting of what's going on here. Now, as I was studying for this, one of the things that I read was that the book of Ruth is part of what they call a Bethlehem trilogy. And the reason that they call it a Bethlehem trilogy is because if you go back and you read this book of Judges, the last 2 stories in the book of Judges, and for sake of time and just for mixed company, they are very graphic stories. And take some time to read it. I'm not entirely sure what the devotional benefit of reading those stories is, because they're just horrendous stories. But they're part of what we call the Bethlehem trilogy, because they all take place in Bethlehem. So we've got this one story, and it's just awful. We've got another story, and again, it's just awful. And then we have this wonderful story of the book of Ruth. So this story here, it takes place during the days of the Judges. And that was a low point in Israel's history. If you look, since you're on Ruth chapter 1, if you look up there, Judges 21:25. It's right there on the top of your page. It says this: in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did with that which was right in his own eyes. So everyone was going about. You can tell what a dark time this is. Everybody's just doing whatever it was that they feel like. And we're going to touch on that here in a later lesson in the book of Ruth, on how that plays out in the book of Ruth. So we're in the days of the Judges, which is a very low point. I touched on the fact that this takes place in the city of Bethlehem. Can anybody tell me what's special about the city of Bethlehem? Two things. I put them on your outline, so if you just look on your outline, you can figure out. Raise your hand. If you can read and you can see it, raise your hand. Yes, ma'am. Oh, you raise your hand. You got an answer.
David and Jesus.
All right. It is the birthplace of David, King David, who went on to become the greatest king of Israel. And it is also the birthplace of Jesus Christ. And so you're trying to think, well, how in the world does such great stuff come from this awful little place? Well, we're about to find out. And the next thing we need to know is there was a famine in the land. And a famine is a time when there is no food available, food's not growing, it's very difficult to get things. And another thing about that is it's typically for wealthy people, it's a time of financial trouble, because in this was a very agrarian culture, meaning they made their money from growing crops and things like that. And if there's no rain, there's no crops growing, are they going to be able to continue to make the wealth that they have? Probably not. Right? So we see that this was in a very low point morally for Israel, that it takes place in the city of Bethlehem, and that there was a famine in the land. So that's the settings, just to get an idea of where this story is coming from. All right, the next thing on our outline here is we've got the characters. So these characters are going to be with us the whole story. Some of them are going to disappear by the time we get to verse 3. So let's look at who the characters are. We've got Elimelech. And Elimelech, just kind of some conjecture, but from my reading, he was kind of a wealthy man. And his name means God is my king. So he had a very, very powerful, very, very, very good name. And so that was his name. And then he was married to a lady named Naomi. And so that was his wife. And they had 2 children. One was named Mahlon, and the other's name was Chilion. And so if you have a pen, you might want to write this down. If you're going to have children or you're going to have grandchildren, don't name your children Mahlon and Chilion, and this is the reason why. The name Mahlon actually means sickly. It means sickly. So how many of you like to have that name? Okay, John would like to have that name. All right, I think that's probably how much driver's license. All right, and then we have Chilion. And his name means death and destruction. So again, these are not names that you want to give to your kids. Probably, they'd be very upset if one day they're looking through a baby book and they're like, "Oh, my name's Chilion." They flip it over and they see the third name means death and destruction. And that would be a little upsetting. And then we've got two more characters here. We've got the name we've got the lady named Orpah, and we've got the lady named Ruth. And they're going to play out here in a second. They are women from Moab. Okay? And the reason it's important to know where they're from is because the Moabites, the land of Moab, they were the enemy of Israel. So there were very specific instructions, and we'll touch on this here in just a second. There were very specific instructions that the children of Israel were not to have anything to do with the Moabites. They were to stay completely away from the Moabites. The Moabites came from, how many of you are familiar with the story of Lot? Okay, we got Lot. He was living in the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. God told him to get out, so he and his daughters took off. His wife turned back and looked, and she got turned to a pillar of salt. So they were left. It was just Lot and his 2 daughters. And one night, the daughters sat down and they said, "You know what? we don't have any children. We need to have some children, or else our family's gonna disappear. And so they decided to give their father some strong drink. We'll call it that. They gave him some strong drink. They gave him a lot of strong drink, so he didn't really know what was going on. And they went in and they did some things that they probably shouldn't have. Actually, not probably, but they shouldn't have done. And about 9 months later, there were some children on the way. And that's one of those children was named Moab. And that's how the people of Moab came to be. So you can see why the children of Israel were told to stay away from the Moabites. They were not to have anything to do with it. All right, so those are the characters. Those are the characters there. We got Orpah and we got Ruth. They're women that married Mahlon and Chilion. All right, let's look now at the action of what's going on in this story, in this particular passage. The first thing we see right there in verse 1, it says, "Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land." So the very first thing we said, we already touched on this, is that there was a famine. Elimelech and his family came into a time where there was no food for them, that they didn't know how they were going to provide for themselves, how they were going to provide for, how Elimelech was going to provide for his family. So he made a decision. And his decision was to move his family from Bethlehem to Moab, because Moab had food. They weren't experiencing the famine. So he decided, you know what, guys? I don't know how long the famine's going to be here. I don't know if it's going to end tomorrow, if it's going to end 10 years from now. But I'm hungry, and you guys are looking pretty hungry too. He's probably talking to Naomi, and he says, you know those boys that we've got, Mahlon and Chilion, for some strange reason, they like to eat 3 times a day. So let's go ahead and pack them up. We're going to move over here to Moab, where they've got food. And so they decided to do that. Now in verse 1, you can see this on your outline, it says, in Ruth 1:1, the family went to sojourn. Basically, what that word means, and I think in the King James here, yeah, it says went to sojourn. Basically, that word means that they went to visit. They went to spend a little bit of time there, just to go get some food, fill their bellies up for a little while. Maybe spend a week there or something like that, almost like being on vacation. Tina and I like to go to Orlando. We go there on vacation. We're going there to sojourn. We're going to visit. We're not going to make it our home. I think we've discussed it before. But there's just too many tours out. But then we see so we see that they're going there for a visit. They're just hanging out for a little while. But then if we move on to verse 2, it says this: "And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name." Okay, we'll skip all that. And then it comes to, "And they came into the country of Moab and continued there." And basically, what that means is that they're no longer visiting. They have now made Moab their home. Elimelech made a choice. He said, I know this is Bethlehem. It's like the breadbasket of Israel. There's always food here. We're going through a time when there's no food. Let's move to Moab, and we'll go for a visit, and hey, let's make this our home. Then in Ruth 1, verse 3, we see that tragedy strikes. And what happens in verse 3 is that Elimelech dies. It's just kind of out of the blue. He's just walking down the street. Obviously I'm conjecturing here. He's just walking down the street and just falls over. Or one night he goes to bed and doesn't wake up. It's very unexpected. It's not something. It's not like he had been sick or anything. It just happened. It's very unexpected. And so Naomi is left with her sons. That's it. She's a widow now. She's got her sons, which is okay because in this culture, the sons were supposed to take care of their parents. So she's got Mahlon and Chilion, and they're going to take care of her. So she's not too worried. But then we have a little bit in verse 4. We got a little bit of hope because we see in verse 4 it says this: "And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth." So we've got a little bit of hope here because who doesn't love a wedding? I'm not really going to go into weddings because the last time I talked about weddings, it didn't go so well. And my wife's still giving me grief over it. So I'm not going to talk about weddings. If you guys heard me preach last time, you know what I'm talking about. Let's just say that Mahlon and Chilion got married. They married Orpah, and they married Ruth. And so things are happening. Naomi's got some hope. Hey, they're gonna be married. They're gonna have children. Our family's gonna grow. We're gonna do all right. But then we see in verse 5 that there's even more tragedy. And it says this: "And Mahlon and Chilion died also both of them, and the woman was left with her 2 sons and her husband." So Elimelech had died. He had passed away very suddenly. There's a tradition that Elimelech was killed by God because of his decision to move to Moab. It's kind of a rabbinic tradition, so there's no biblical literature to back that up. It's just kind of what Jewish people teach. That God killed him suddenly because of his decision to move to Moab and to stay there. And then, so we see that Mahlon and Chilion, they got married. So everything's going great. They're going to have babies, all that stuff, And they're married for about 10 years. And then all of a sudden, Mahlon and Chilion die also. And so now we're left with Naomi, who's a widow. We're left with Ruth, who's a widow. We're left with Orpah, who's a widow. And right now, fortunately for myself, fortunately for Tina, I don't know that we have ever experienced tragedy this great. Can I speak for you? Okay, she's shaking her head no. So we've never experienced tragedy like this. I can't speak for all of you. I'm sure that some of you in here have experienced tragedy so dark you don't know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. I don't want to ask you to raise your hand because I don't want to put you on the spot like that. But that's where Naomi is. She's at a point where things are so dark she's not sure what's going to happen. And that's where we're going to leave our story for today. I'm just going to leave it here. But let's look down on your outline. We've got some application here. And it says this. When you're faced with problems, there are three responses. There are three things that we can do when we have those problems. And these things aren't original to me. I got these from a pastor named Danny Aiken, who I was reviewing his material as I was preparing for this. The first thing that we can do when we're faced with a problem is, when we're faced with a problem is we can face the problems and we can work our way through it. We see the problem coming, we're experiencing it, we can work our way through it. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be easy. I'm not saying it's going to be a cakewalk or a walk in the park by any means, but we're gonna work our way through it. The second thing is we can ignore those problems and hope they go away. I don't know how many of you have ever tried that you have a problem and you just ignore it and you think it's going to go away. I'll give you an example. It's kind of a silly example. Earlier this year, I started getting this crusty stuff in the corner of my eye. I don't want to be real gross, but I got this crusty stuff in the corner of my eye. I'm like, you know what? It's just I slept and it's all that stuff that gets in your eye when you sleep. So I ignored it. I washed it out. The next day, I had more. No big deal. I kept ignoring the problem until one day I woke up and my eye was completely caked shut. And I was like, it's no big deal. It's just, no problem, whatever. I went to school and my eye was as red as this lady's shirt. Go figure, right? And the nurse took one look at me. She's like, go to the nurse. Go to the doctor. She sent me immediately from school to the doctor. And of course it turned out that I had pink eye, and I had very severe pink eye because I didn't take care of it. So for some of us who choose to do dumb things like I did, we see problems coming, we ignore them and hope they go away. And I can promise you that is never the case. You have a problem and you ignore it, it never goes away. It just comes back even worse. And then the third way is we can run from them and try to avoid them. And that's what we see that our buddy Elimelech did. The note under there is Elimelech chose to run, indicating a lack of faith. Now, I've done a lot of talking here. I've been talking for about the past 10 minutes or so. Could I have somebody look up Leviticus 25:35? That verse will indicate to us why it demonstrated a lack of faith on Elimelech's part when he decided to take off from Moab. So if you've got Leviticus 25:35, when you got somebody just raise your hand so I know to call on you. Don, I'm going to call him Jeremy Sue. All right. This gentleman right here in the front, he raised his hand first. Can anybody tell me, based on that verse, why did Moab and Naomi running to Moab, why did that demonstrate a lack of faith? Based on what we just read there in Leviticus 25, why was that a lack of faith on his part? You don't have to raise your hand this time, you can just call it out.
They weren't looking to God to fulfill His promise.
Okay.
To fulfill the promise.
Exactly. Anybody else want to add on to that, or maybe have a different answer? Okay, all right. So, yeah, that's exactly right. What he said. Basically, what we've got here in Leviticus is we've got a law that says if your brother or somebody in your town, your neighbor, whatever, if they fall on hard times, it's your responsibility to take care of them. It's your responsibility. So let's say Matt and Jennifer live next door to Tina and I, and God forbid something horrible happens to them, some tragedy falls on them, and they're in just some financial, some dire straits financially. It's according to this passage, it's up to Tina and I to help take care of them. Now we're not going to pay all their bills, obviously, but we might take a meal over to them or something. So that's right there. Elimelech didn't believe that God's people were going to obey that law, that God was going to fulfill his promise there through that law. And so he hightailed it over to Moab, where there was food. Showed a lack of faith on his part. All right, point 2 there. I think we're going to finish up way early tonight, so we'll have time for fellowship. How about that? Point 2 says this: when times are difficult, we need to trust God. I just got finished the last, 12 weeks or so. We've been going through, in our class up in the fellowship hall, we've been going through a video series that dealt entirely with the children of Israel as they were wandering through the wilderness. And for those of you that were in that class with me, one of you raise your hand so I know who to call on. What was the number one thing that the children of Israel had to do in order to survive their experience in the wilderness? There was one thing they had to do. Somebody raise your hand. I know you all know this because I didn't even teach that. It was a video.
Trust in God.
They had to trust in God. All right. If we want to get through experience, if we want to get through troubles, if we want to get through hard times, the number one thing that we have to do is we have to trust in God. Point A under there says this: we need to trust God during troublesome times. So if you want to write that down, we need to trust God during troublesome times. Now, Elimelech here is serving as an example of how you don't want to trust God. Okay, Elimelech, his first thought was, oh, where there's no food, let's go where there's food. He did not believe that God was going to fulfill his promise, that God was going to take care of him. Letter I said, I've never seen that like that. It says this: Elimelech demonstrated a lack of faith by moving to Moab. So if you want to fill that in, Elimelech demonstrated a lack of faith by moving to Moab. And I think we've kind of covered that sufficiently. I don't need to go into any more reasons as to why he demonstrated a lack of faith by moving to Moab. The second point under there is Elimelech demonstrated a lack of wisdom by choosing to stay in Moab. Elimelech demonstrated a lack of wisdom by choosing to stay in Moab. Elimelech, when he went there looking for good things. What did he actually find? Anybody? He found something. He found it, Mahlon found it, and Chilion found it. What did they find? Yeah. They found death, okay? I'm not saying that Elimelech would have survived had he moved back to Bethlehem. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is that he saw a problem. He took off running to some place where he thought it was going to be better. We've all heard that saying, the grass is greener on the other side. But once we get over to the other side, we realize it's not really as green as we thought it was. I go out in my yard and I look at my yard, and we have the world's worst yard. It is awful. I don't like my yard. I don't know why it's so bad. And I look over at my neighbor's yard. Wow, they got a really nice yard. And then I walk over to their yard, and I see that it's got the same problems we do. It's got the same dog spots. They've got about, how many dogs they have? 17 or 18? They've got a lot of dogs. Okay. Tina says they've only got 2, but I think these dogs are hooked up to microphones. They are loud. But they've got the dog spots. They've got the clover. They've got all the same problems that I do. But when I'm standing in my front door and I'm looking over at their yard's really nice. My yard, I don't like this thing. But I look at their yard. I look at Sandy and Linda's yard. Wow, they have a nice yard. I walk over there. It's not that way. Elimelech, he looked over at Moab. He saw that they had grain. He saw all these things. What he didn't see was the fact that if he moved to Moab, he wasn't coming home. Mahlon and Chilion, they were probably young boys when they left. They were just going along with their dad. Suddenly they found themselves the men of the house, they could have made the decision, Mom, it's time for us to move back. It's time for us to go back. They chose to stay. They demonstrated a lack of wisdom. They didn't go back to Bethlehem. The second thing there is trust God during sorrowful times. And the sad fact is that sorrowful times are going to come for all of us. I was listening. It's a great privilege for us to sit here and listen to all of the prayer requests that are shared each week. That's a great privilege, because then we have the opportunity to take each other's burdens and we can share them before the Lord. But if you really think about it, if you listen to it, there's so much sorrow during that time. There's so much tragedy. There's so much sickness. There's so many people that are passing away, or they're coming down with terminal illnesses. And it can be a time where if you let it, if you just sit there and you let it can just wear away at your soul. And I am so thankful that Pastor Devin is not here tonight. And I know that sounds worse than I mean it to. I'm thankful that he's not here because he's on vacation. He's getting some rest. Because I've had the opportunity to spend some time with him. And he loves his church family so much. He loves us, and you can see at times that the burdens of this, and I don't want to call y'all burdens, so don't read into that. But the fact that there are hurting people in this church, and there are people that are facing terminal illnesses, and there are people that are going through surgeries, that just wears on him. Okay, so when I say I'm glad he's not here, I'm glad he's on vacation. I hope he comes back refreshed. So I'm also glad he's not here. But the point I'm trying to make is all of us are going to go through sorrowful times. Some of those sorrowful times are going to be very, very painful for us. Some of them are going to be not quite as painful as other times, but we're all going to go through them. And the first point under here is God works through unexpected tragedies. So if you got your pen, you want to write that down. God works through unexpected tragedies. Like I said, Elimelech dies rather abruptly. I've shared this story before of an unexpected tragedy. So if you've heard me teach or preach, you've heard me talk about this before. But one of the guys that I look to as kind of a mentor, even though I've never met him, is a pastor from Texas named Matt Chandler. And I guess it was about a year and a half ago on Thanksgiving morning. And if you've heard this, you can tune me out of it. But on Thanksgiving morning, he got up and he was having coffee. And he remembers, he took a sip of his coffee. And the next thing that he remembers from that is waking up in the hospital. And it turned out that he had gotten up to go do something with his baby. I guess the baby was crying or something. He got up to go take care of the baby, and he had a grand mal seizure. Hit his head on the coffee table, and that's all he remembers. I mean, that's the last thing he remembers. He doesn't even remember having the seizure. He doesn't even remember falling. And they took him to the hospital, and they found out that he had, and forgive me, I don't know how to pronounce it. He says it all the time, and it just kind of flows off his tongue. Basically, he had a huge brain tumor, about the size of a grapefruit. I think it's a grapefruit. Big, massive brain tumor. And so he had to have immediate surgery to get it taken care of. He was in physical therapy for a while, trying to get his motor functions back, learning how to speak. And he's a pastor, so that's how he makes his living is through talking. And the reason I tell this is because that was an unexpected tragedy. It's not like he woke up that morning and goes, "Hey, I'm going to have a seizure," and almost die. That's not what he was intending. But the consequence of that, what happened is fortunately we live in an age of Facebook and Twitter and all of those things, so that things get around quickly. So by that evening, or even the next morning, those of us that follow him, that listen to him, that pray for him on a regular basis, we all knew, okay, Matt Chandler's in the hospital, something's wrong. And the unexpected consequence of that, I don't mean that in a negative term, was the fact that there were hundreds and thousands of people praying for Matt that evening, whereas that wouldn't happen before. And he tells stories of how he's getting letters and how he's getting pictures of people from all around the world, people he's never met before, that are praying for him and that are sharing his story. And people are coming to Christ as a result of the fact that Matt had a grand mal seizure and almost died. So we can see that God works through unexpected tragedies. The second thing there is God works through unimaginable tragedies. Mahlon and Chilion died, leaving their widow mother and their wives. All right, that is an unimaginable tragedy, especially for Naomi, because in this particular culture, in this environment, if you were a widow and you didn't have any male children, you were just about as good as dead, because there was nobody to take care of you. The children of Israel, the law said to take care of them, but that didn't necessarily always happen. So for Naomi and for Ruth and Orpah, this was an unimaginable tragedy. And in conclusion, and maybe we should finish up this one time, God works in many ways that often do not make sense to us. We can take comfort in Isaiah 55:8. And if you'll flip over there real quick, I'll share with you what that verse is. Yeah, wait a second, a little bit. I'm actually going to start in verse 6 so we can get the context of what's going on. But Isaiah 55, starting in verse 6, it says this: "Seek ye the Lord while he may be found, call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts, and let him return unto the Lord, and he will have mercy upon him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon." And this is verse 8. "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord." I'm going to read verse 9 and 12. "For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." So when we experience these tragedies, when we go through unexpected tragedies, or even unimaginable tragedies so dark, so painful, so immense that we can't see God's hand in it, we need to take comfort in the fact that God's ways are not our ways, and His thoughts are not our thoughts. God has a plan through everything, and we're going to see what God's plan was here in the book of Ruth, why He allowed these tragedies to happen. I got one last thing for us to close with. But does anybody have any thoughts? I know I did a lot of talking tonight, and Pastor Devin usually has more communication with you guys. I'm still learning this thing. Any thoughts, or anybody want to point anything out about the book of Ruth? I am by no means an expert on it. Oh, okay. Let me leave you with this little bit. It's going to sound like a poem, but these are actually the lyrics of a song. This is a song called "Shadows" by the David Crowder Band. So if you're familiar with his music at all, you may be familiar with this. But this is what it says: "Life is full of light and shadow." We saw that in the story of Ruth. We had the light. They got married. Mahlon and Chilion got married. I'm sure it was a beautiful wedding. All that kind of stuff. Life is full of light and shadow. Oh, the joy, and oh, the sorrow. Oh, the sorrow. And yet will He bring dark to light, and yet will He bring day to night. When shadows fall on us, we will not fear, we will remember. When all seems lost, when we're thrown and we're tossed, we remember the cost, we rest in Him, the shadow of the cross. Let's pray. Father, I thank you. I thank you that you are a sovereign God. I thank you that everything that we go through, all of the experiences that we have, whether they are good things or whether, like we looked at tonight in the book of Ruth, they're unexpected or unimaginable tragedies, Lord. That even when we go through those things, that your hand is there, and that you are guiding us through those. That when these events happen, when these things take place, they are not a surprise to you. That you didn't wake up and say, "Oh my goodness, how in the world did that happen to that person?" But that this is a part of your plan, and it's going to perfect us and make us more like your Son, Jesus, and it's also going to bring glory to your name. Father, I thank you for the opportunity to share the book of Ruth. Lord, I hope that folks here will take the time this week to read through the story and to fall in love with the story as much as I have as I've been studying for it. Lord, I thank you for the folks that are here tonight, Lord. I hope they know that I've been praying for them this week, maybe not by name, but I've been praying for them. And Lord, I ask that you would give them a great week. Bring us back here on Sunday as we come back to worship you. We ask all this in your name. Amen. My microphone on, but I think I'm loud enough. Acts 17:26. All right, let me read it one more time. says this, and hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed, and the bounds of their habitation. The reason that's my favorite verse and what it has to do with the book of Ruth is, if you remember, I said Ruth was a Moabite, and the Moabites were the enemies of the Israelites. They were not supposed to have anything to it. But if you get an opportunity, we're not going to look at it right now, but look at Matthew chapter 1. And you're going to find that in Matthew chapter 1, you've got a genealogy of Jesus. And buried in the middle of that genealogy is the name Ruth. All right, and what that has to do with Acts 17:26 is that verse tells us that God has planned out all the days that He has for us. And He's even planned out the places that we're going to live. So the fact that you all are here tonight, the fact that you all live in the neighborhoods you live in, the fact that I live in Charlestown and I'm standing up here, this was all God's plan before He even put the world into place. And what that has to do with Ruth is that even though she was a Moabite and they weren't supposed to have anything to do with the Moabites, God used His sovereign ability and the poor decisions of Elimelech to move Ruth, and we're going to find out that she moves to Bethlehem so that she could be in the lineage of Jesus. So that's where that comes into play. Thank you for reminding me. All right, any other thoughts before we go? All right, then I'll say you are dismissed.